The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello, hello, hello. Let's make sure that all is well here. Yes, it looks like it is. Hot mic indeed. And hi, welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast, special live edition that we are doing this week. I thought the subject matter, which was we're doing by request, and I thought since we're doing this topic, what would be a more appropriate show to do live than this one about parasocial relationships between content creators, influencers, celebrity people, very important people, VIPs, whatever, and, regular folk, non-influencers, and what this is all about, and how maybe this might possibly connect to YouTube, ex-cult spaces, things like that. Thought we might discuss this. So here we go. And I will be interacting a bit, or at least it's my plan today to interact with you a bit in the same way that we do with the Q&A show. While this is not, I'm not running this like my Q&A show, where I'm just going to go from comment to comment, responding on it. I did bring papers. And I have things to go over here, so why don't we just go ahead and get into it. Okay, cool. First Scientology-related ish video I've watched since, okay, cool. Good, well, let's get into it. Because we're definitely going to mention some things about the ex-Scientology space while we're going into today's stuff. But I'm trying to do this in a way as to avoid all of the drama that is generated by parasocial relationships, amongst other things. This is not the only thing that causes, a lot of drama or fireworks on YouTube, but it is at the heart of an awful lot of it. Maybe not all of it, but an awful lot. So let's get into it here. Parasocial relationships. Parasocial, what does that mean? Well, basically, are those one-sided bonds? Yep. Okay, good. Just making sure I'm all good here. Are those one-sided bonds that form when an audience feels a deep connection with a public figure, often without any direct interaction, right? They're not really talking, interacting, meeting in real life or anything like that, and yet people can feel this very deep connection. While they might sound harmless on the surface, these connections can blur boundaries and lead to serious consequences for both the audience and the creators. And in some cases, they can go horribly wrong. Let me give you two real-life examples to paint a clearer picture. And in order to give some of these examples today, I went first outside of the ex-cult space to the more broad, big-name YouTubers, some of whose names you may recognize and some not. There's a lot of big influencers out there, but the world is a really, really big place. And there can be people who have millions and millions of followers and be very influential people in one corner of the market or world or YouTube or whatever, and there are whole groups of people who don't know anything about them and have never heard of them. It does not require that you have to be at the level of Tom Cruise or something in order to develop parasocial relationships with people. So let's take a look at two real-life examples. First, there is the case of a YouTuber known as Gabby Hanna, a popular YouTuber and musician. Now, in 2015, Gabby spoke about a stalker who pretended to be one of her best friends. She was contacted, rather, by this stalker who pretended to be one of her best friends with a new number, and then started asking her intimate questions and tried to trick her into making adult content. In 2020, she sent a series of tweets pleading with a stalker who may or may not have been the same person, begging them to stop making her life miserable, and that of her family, by the way. Quote, The worst part of having a stalker is the paranoia, she wrote. It makes it hard to engage with fans because you never know if it's the person that hurt you behind the keyboard. You can keep on blocking accounts, she said, but they always find a way to contact you. They always find a fucking way. She claims some of the stalkerish and predatory behavior directed her way was coming from former friends and fans. Now we can take another look at another very, very popular YouTuber named, who goes under the moniker Dream. And he's a Minecraft YouTuber. He plays the game Minecraft, and he's got millions of devoted fans. And despite his efforts to keep his personal life private, initially, his face is out there now, but initially he was very anonymous and very purposefully so. But some fans were so obsessed with uncovering his identity that they resorted to doxing, exposing his personal information online. The harassment that followed exemplifies the darker side of parasocial relationships, where fandom crosses into harmful obsession. Today, we'll unpack the evolution of parasocial relationships, their psychological impacts, and the lessons creators, fans, and platforms can learn to ensure healthier boundaries. And that is a really key word to keep in mind when it comes to parasocial relationships, is boundaries. This is also a word that is very, very difficult for ex-cult members to get their wits around and apply in their life or put into place in their life. And there are many, and we'll talk, of course, in more detail about this as we go, but definitely... Yeah, interesting on the sound. I apologize for any sound difficulties, but I believe we're okay. It might be an issue on your end with that. Anyway, but please let me know in the comments if we have further problems with that. All right. So, what exactly are parasocial relationships? Let's go deeper. Originally coined in the 1950s, the term described the one-sided relationship viewers formed with television personalities. Fast forward to the era of YouTube, and these relationships have evolved in ways that were unimaginable back then. Unlike traditional celebrities, YouTube creators often share intimate details of their lives, upload personal vlogs, and interact with their audiences in real time via live streams and comment sections. Right, and that's what we're doing literally right now, talking about this. Now, I want to be clear that what we're doing and interacting right here is nothing wrong with this, right? We're going to parse out where it goes bad and where it goes wrong. The idea here today is not that the entire nature of YouTube is bent, in a destructive manner, at least on this particular point. But again, more to say here. So this interactivity, this back and forth between creators and viewers can make viewers feel like they genuinely know the creator. And I have been contacted personally a number of times over the years by people who have actually introed that way. I feel like I know you. I feel like I know everything about you, even though I've never spoken with you before. I'm so giddy to talk to you, and I appreciate all of that. I'm so giddy to talk to you because, you know me, or I know you, but you don't know anything about me, and that, that kind of unbalanced thing that they try to even acknowledge, when they're getting to reach out and talk to me. And that's only happened a couple times with me. Of course, I can imagine with much larger creators, it gets, significantly worse. So let's be clear about this, right? In terms of this business of knowing a creator. Parasocial relationships are inherently unbalanced. While the audience might feel deeply connected, for the creator, these interactions are one of many. This imbalance is where things can become problematic. All right. There are several factors that make YouTube a breeding ground for parasocial relationships. So let's take a look at some of them. You know how I love my bullet points. I almost put this up on the screen. Okay, let's go here. Authenticity, and relatability. And these are key characteristics of any successful YouTube channel, by the way. This is something that, you know, when you go into becoming a YouTuber, this is something that I have talked to other people who are becoming YouTubers, and you will find on the internet as pretty general advice out there that if you want to be successful at doing this, that you need to be real, you need to be authentic, relatable, right, and authentic. I've kind of done that from day one. I've never really had the idea of some other persona that I'm wearing, although some other YouTubers do that. Creators often build what appear to be relationships with their audiences by sharing their vulnerabilities and everyday experiences. This is certainly common in the ex-cult space, where cult survivors open up and for periods of time become incredibly vulnerable in sharing the intimate details of their abuse. When audience members see candid discussions about our struggles with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and other mental health challenges, this often resonates deeply, many of whom see these survivors as friends offering comfort. And they're not necessarily wrong in intent, but, you know, when you form too tight a connection, and it's an interesting thing, though, because of the nature of what we're sharing and the intimacy with which we're sharing it, often in real life, you don't have those kind of conversations or learn that kind of thing from people, total strangers, people you don't know anything about. They don't generally just open up to you like that at the grocery store, or the post office, or, you know, at school or something. People aren't just ripping out their heart and showing it to you. But on YouTube, they do. Because for at least on this channel, there's an effort at education. On other channels, there's efforts at, you know, salacious documentation and looky-loo and eat the popcorn and watch the awful. But regardless, there are very, very intimate things there. And one of the things that I think can be confusing for people who are viewers is that because in real life, it takes a long time and you generally really become like quite close to somebody before they start opening up about their deepest, darkest trauma, then people can feel artificially deeply connected with people on the screen, right? Because of all that sharing. I think that's a factor as to where some of the confusion comes from, you know? And some of the emotional confusion too, because here's somebody sharing a real, true tragedy, like awful stuff. And of course, your heart feels for them. There's so much empathy and compassion, you know, and you want to help the person, and there they are to interact with, right? And away we go. Another point as to YouTube and it being a breeding ground for parasocial relationships are the frequency with which people will post their content. Regular uploads, sometimes daily, allow viewers to feel like they're growing alongside their favorite creators. Daily uploading is actually key to creating this illusion, but it doesn't have to be that often for a parasocial connection to be created. We have seen many examples of this in the ex-cult space and in very popular YouTubers such as Casey Neistat. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. Huge YouTuber, and also very been around on the platform for a very, very long time. And he was one of the first YouTube creators to talk about his daily job and family life and really bring people into his life as part of his creation. That's, you know, that opened the door to a lot of this. I'm happy to see so many people here in the chat today. Welcome to the show. And finally, there is community building. And let's talk about this for a second, because many creators foster a sense of belonging through interactive tools like memberships and Discord servers and live Q&A sessions. This deepens the feeling of connection and makes audiences feel like part of an exclusive club. My critics. This community building on YouTube or in social media spaces is often a premeditated tactical move on the part of creators to create tighter social bonds and is not the same thing as organic community forming. Creators can even give their subscribers special names or identities or labels, and also use emojis and graphics and merch to identify themselves. And of course, the second you start assigning names and labels and identities to people, you know, what happens, right? Us versus them, and tribalism instincts, and a number of things start kicking in, sort of psychologically and sociologically with, you know, with the group, that just kind of automatically happen. It's not a matter of, I want to be super, super clear in all of this, that it's not a matter of trying to point the finger at somebody and say, you are so wrong for wanting human connection. You know, it's not wrong at all. And there are many, many tricks and tools that are used by content creators in order to help establish that connection and make it feel stronger. This is a purposeful thing. And even, I will say, even I have done this. Now, I haven't done this in a way that I've wanted to create parasocial relationships, but I have to admit that the possibility is always there because I'm using the same tools as every other YouTuber when it comes to this sort of thing. But it's not just on YouTube either. Keep in mind that there are also major, major celebrities out there who have used these same community building tools. Lady Gaga, for example, purposefully identifies, or used to identify, her fans as her monsters, and really went on a roll about that. And there was a lot of merch and various things about that. And it really did form a kind of community just because of that label. It's very powerful stuff. All right. Now, let's talk about the effects of these relationships, starting with the audience. On the positive side, parasocial relationships can provide emotional support and inspiration. For viewers who feel isolated, these connections can offer a sense of belonging. I hope I am saying this name right. Markiplier's fans. He's another big YouTuber I don't watch, but I found out about while I was studying on this stuff. Markiplier's fans, for instance, often cite his humor and kindness as sources of comfort during tough times. Over the years, I have definitely attempted to use this platform for exactly this purpose. Right? We want to educate, we want to inform, we want to help, we want to provide comfort, we want to provide help. You know, but those lines get drawn. There's a darker side. Fans can develop unrealistic expectations, leading to disappointment or even anger when creators take breaks, change their content, or enforce boundaries. Popular YouTubers, for example, face backlash from fans when they step back from YouTube, despite it being a necessary move for their mental health. I mentioned Gabby Hanna earlier. She took a very long break from YouTube and received quite a bit of backlash for that because fans can become obnoxiously overbearing sometimes in their demands on content creators. And that's when you're kind of crossing lines over into those darker sides. For creators, though, the stakes are also equally high. The pressure to maintain an authentic and consistent persona can lead to burnout. Jenna Marbles, another YouTuber, ultimately retired from the platform, citing the immense strain of balancing her personal life with the expectations of millions of fans. And of course, I can only dream of what it's like to have millions of fans. I mean, that's pressure that is difficult to communicate. Even at the smaller levels that I'm at, this is a job, and it has demands, and it has responsibilities and obligations, and those are often self-created by it was sort of working for myself. YouTubers sort of work for ourselves, but once you start developing a fan base and people who have expectations about you, then your life is not really fully your own anymore. Not if you want to keep that going. And that's how it can be. It can be an interesting thing on both ends of this equation, because then and I think you have maybe seen me sometimes apologize for getting sick or for taking time off or not being around to post content, even at a lower channel level like I have. it can weigh on a person like, oh, I owe these people. I really need to produce for them. I've got to give this over to them, because how else am I going to make a living, and how else am I going to maintain a community and people I can help? And how am I going to grow my channel if I take a break, and this kind of thing. The pressure is real, and it can be quite enormous. We have seen many people actually in the ex-cult space, ex-Scientology and otherwise, pick up stakes and just stop talking at all after facing some pretty horrible reactions and backlash. So, funny comment there. Okay, so as we saw earlier with Gabby Hanna and with Dream, and I'm thinking right now, actually, before I go into this last bit here, that maybe I will open this up to questions, because that might be actually the best way to interact with you guys about this content and how it might apply in ways you're thinking of. So actually, let's go ahead and do it that way. So as we saw earlier with Gabby Hanna and with Dream, parasocial relationships can spiral out of control. And let me give you one more example. You may have heard of a YouTuber. He is literally one of the most famous YouTubers in the world, PewDiePie. And his actual name is Felix, but PewDiePie is one of the most famous YouTubers, and he's faced issues stemming from his fan base's extreme loyalty. Some fans have attacked other creators or critics, believing they were defending PewDiePie. While Felix himself did not condone these actions, it highlights how parasocial relationships can foster a sense of misplaced loyalty that leads to harmful behavior, right? At no point, at any time, do you owe people on YouTube anything at all, any more than you would owe the creator of or the stars of a sitcom or a movie, or the author of a book. This is creative work, educational work, put out to entertain, inform, enlighten. But it doesn't create obligations on your part. But the psychological tricks that can be used, and just the nature of how we interact, especially in the digital age, have created some very codependent behaviors. So how do we address these challenges? Let's look at the solutions for creators, fans, and platforms. Okay, and I'm going to be really brief about this. For creators, our job, of course, is to communicate clear boundaries. Creators like Tom Scott, for example, make it clear they're not always available for direct engagement, helping manage fan expectations. And also, of course, creators have got to seek competent, professional mental health support and take breaks as needed. Because like I said, that idea of owing things to people on both ends of this can be quite strong. It can be a very, very strong urge. And it is a misplaced one. At the end of the day, it's a very, very misplaced one. For fans, because, I wanted to do this without coming across like I'm pointing the finger or something, because I'm not. I'm commenting on the fact that people act this way. I'm not judging them for the fact that they do it. I think, though, that it's a good idea to look at how we can mitigate it. And understand, for fans, they have to understand that these relationships are one-sided and don't expect reciprocal attention. You have to treat creators as entertainers, not as personal friends. And also, it's up to the fandom in the community to call out bad behavior on the part of fanatical fans, right? Remember, fan is short for fanatic. And also to promote respectful engagement. Now, on my particular channel and slice of YouTube, that has very, very rarely been a problem, where I've had real, real bad things going on in my community. But in the larger cult space, things can get incredibly difficult, and violently so. So it is up to fans to sort of, if you're going to form a community, then you have to establish certain guidelines and rules, and that's all part of having community. Otherwise, you're just an anarchy. And for platforms, and this is where I think the real brunt of a lot of obligation falls, because the platforms that we're using, especially the social media platforms, are demonstrating less and less responsibility for the negative repercussions of the platform's existence. And while platforms and content creators cannot be held personally responsible for every bad act on the part of watchers, that's just a very, very unrealistic expectation. We can and still should be aware of the fact that this is a problem, and it's something that we can try to mitigate. So from the platform's perspective, they can strengthen privacy protections, for example, masking IP addresses during live streams. That would be a platform specific thing that could and should be done. They can offer educational campaigns about parasocial relationships, such as what I'm doing literally right now. It would be wonderful, wouldn't it, to see these platforms take some responsibility for that and put out things that kind of are almost not warnings, but advisories. Let's put it that way, advisories. And platforms could provide dedicated resources for creator safety and even for mental health resources. I would never expect YouTube or Facebook or something to offer mental health resources or pay for such things for creators, but certainly understanding that that's part of the picture, and offering some advisory instruction in how to avoid parasocial relationships, what they are, and how to, avoid creating them in the first place, would be very good advice for up-and-coming YouTubers. I mean, this is something that generally people have to learn through the school of hard knocks. And sometimes those knocks can be pretty damn hard. Okay, so to sort of get to the summary conclusion of this, and not necessarily the end of the show here, but to the parts of what I wanted to go over, parasocial relationships are a complex byproduct of our digital age. While they can bring joy and connection, they can also carry significant risks if left unchecked. By fostering awareness and promoting healthy boundaries, we can ensure that creators and audiences alike can continue to thrive in the online world. I would also like to add to this that there is a further danger, and I didn't write this down and I should have, so I'm going to go over it now. There's a danger in the ex-cult space specifically with parasocial relationships, and this is probably pretty obvious, but I'm going to say it out loud. Ex-cult members have very, very serious codependency issues when they come out of a cult. And part of a recovery process and part of the healing that has to happen for people who come out of cults is to recognize, acknowledge, and deal with that codependency. I've been through it. I've observed many, many other people go through it. And I would say it's almost universal in nature, because you can't really be in a cult without developing a codependent relationship with the group and the leader. Or the leadership as it's represented to you. Maybe you never met the actual leader, but you still develop a codependent relationship with the group itself. You must have this group. This group must continue to survive or flourish or grow in order for you to feel like you can flourish and grow and prosper. And that's just not true at all. But that codependency kind of installs this very severe, very extreme view about the relationship between you and the group you're part of. And this is a key part of cult recovery, is kind of getting straight on this. Took me years to figure this out, right? Because it wasn't like somebody was helping me along the way right off. And codependency is a very, very sneaky, very hard to spot problem that we can carry around with us, because it can feel so natural, it feels so emotional, and it can feel at times so emotionally satisfying to be in a relationship with somebody on a codependent level, that because there's so much emotion involved in it, such a strength of it, that that can really well, it messes with cult members' heads. So when they come out and they're in the ex-cult space on social media, there are habits and feelings and attitudes that come with the person, and they will have a tendency in the direction of wanting to make sure that everybody's cool and everybody's happy with them and everything's good, right? There's an over-exaggerated amount of attention on the part of former cult members on this point. And the audience can sometimes pick up on that and feel they need to extend and overextend themselves to care for this person or show them some love or show them some support. And it can go a little too far because you get that faux social connection. And then comes the tribalism. Then comes the us versus them, right? Then comes the community and that kind of thing. And again, these can be good things in small, moderated amounts. They can be really bad when it goes too far. And I think that cult members are particularly susceptible to this, is what I'm saying, right? As a group of people, if we're going to classify people, right, then that's a group that would be susceptible to that, or something that we should be paying even more attention to, the liability of parasocial relationships developing in that space. I think what I just said would probably be true in many trauma spaces, right? Places on YouTube or social media where people are trying to heal, trying to share their stories, trying to get the word, expose the abuses, this kind of thing. There are many, many topics and areas where this is done, not just with cults. Domestic abuse survivors, for example, gang survivors, trafficking survivors. I mean, all of that is coercive control, and all of that exists on YouTube. You can find survivor stories. They're all over the place. And then you can connect with that and feel very close to it. And if those people who are creating that, and if we are not aware of this, parasocial thing, it can get ugly. All right. Let's see what kind of comments we have here coming in, and whether y'all have stuff that should be commented on here. This is why I wanted to do this live, is because I really wanted to see what you guys had to say about this, now that I have sort of said what I'm thinking about this. What are you guys thinking about this? Let me know. Yes, I think Fran Cat here says, for example, I'm going to throw some of these. Oh my goodness, I have not been on the host and chat screen this entire time. Let me pop over there, because I can throw some of these up on the screen and address them as we go, just like we do with our Q&As. So Fran Cat says, I think some of these creators know what they're doing and encourage parasocial relationships, and I think you're absolutely right. I don't know that as many creators are as aware of this as might seem, but it is to the advantage. Let me say this. It appears to be to a content creator's advantage. And it can even be a point of like worry and upset and like concern that they are not creating enough community, that they are not creating enough of a connection with their viewership, and that they want to create a community. They want to create, something that is group related with their channel, not just throw out content. And when they start going in this direction, and I have gone in this direction with wanting to create community, then they will start bringing in some of these other tools of community building. And that's where things on the audience's side, there can be misunderstandings. And then the creator might not really be aware of this problem, just to give a little bit benefit of the doubt. Now, that all being said, yes, there are definitely people who go overboard And whether they're doing it maliciously or desperately, they do it. Maybe they need the money. Maybe they need the attention. Maybe they need the validation or the acknowledgement. And there's nothing wrong with needing any of those things, but the desperation with which people can act to get them can be wrong. And the things that people, content creators, will sometimes say or do, or the versions of themselves that they will present in order to create or do what they think they need to do to get this attention and get these parasocial relations, can be quite unnerving, right? Quite disturbing, because people will become the worst versions of themselves on camera sometimes, right? They will go to the worst possible places. They will find the worst possible interpretations of a conflict or situation because they know that conflict drives engagement. They know that drama leads the way, right? If it bleeds, it leads. This has constantly been true in the entertainment as well as news media space. So, do some content creators go overboard with this and invest too heavily in this and become kind of confused on this issue? Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Absolutely. Oh, that's interesting. Love Food Kitchen mentions PewDiePie was quiet and kept to himself while Zoella was desperately look at me. I am sure that is true. And that's what I was just kind of mentioning, is that people will present, people will present different versions of themselves on camera as opposed to who they really are. Now, this is something I get to say I've never done, but there are people who do. And they and who you see on camera is a very different version of them than who they really are. And that can be, that's one of the main reasons why establishing that parasocial strong bond with the creator is such a mistake for you guys as audience members, because you don't really know who we are, right? There's just no way for you to. Because we don't live our lives on camera. We present for very brief periods of time on camera. You know? So it's really not the real us that you're connecting with. Even when somebody like me is being my real self, I'm not being my full self on camera. There's tons of things I don't tell you guys about, and it's none of your business, so why would I? Right? But again, when you get content creators who start thinking or feeling that they have to overshare, that everything is your business, that's what I meant with that codependency thing. The lines can get all not just blurred, they're just not there at all. There's no boundaries at all. And that's definitely a place that is not healthy for you or for me or for thee, right? Yeah, Local Juco says, there's a trend of viewers saying, your content helped me through a hard time. I owe my life to you, and this is scary. I would agree with you. I don't think that anybody should say that they owe their lives to a YouTuber. I do think that gratitude is good, and I do think acknowledgement is good. And I have to tell you that when I help somebody and they let me know that I have helped them in a significant way, it makes my day. It absolutely makes my day, sometimes my week. I mean, I don't do this for no reason, and I want that feedback. But the exaggerated feedback and the, oh my God, my life is saved now, let's dial it down a little bit. Maybe we don't have to go all the way there. So I would agree with Juco on that matter. Robert Tobias brings up an excellent point. I wonder if part of this has to do with quality mental health care being unaffordable. I will say that is absolutely the case. This is interesting. What is happening in the comments here? Okay. All right. So let me address this thing with Robert. Sorry, I was just laughing at something else happening in the comments. So, mental health care, accessibility to it. it's almost inaccessible. It's really quite bad. The situation with good mental health care in the United States and around the world is actually pretty bad for a number of reasons, which we've covered on this channel, from mainly being accessibility. 4 out of 5 people who have mental health issues, according to Harvard research, which I've featured on this podcast earlier this year or last year. 4 out of 5 people who need mental health care or guidance cannot get it or will not get it. And I mean of any kind. They won't even pick up a book because they can't. They don't have access to it. It's not available to them. They are geographically challenged. They are literacy challenged. Or there is just other accessibility issues that they just don't have access. Then you get to the 1 out of those 5 who can get to somebody, and then the course of treatment is too long. They can't put up with it or deal with it, or it's ineffective for them for some reason, or they just don't make a connection with a psychologist, or the book doesn't do it for them, and they give up and they move on, right? It's just too much. The problem itself can help prevent the solution. So these are factors. And so YouTube content on the internet is super accessible, super abundant, and easy to consume. So if people are looking for mental health guidance or mental health help, well, there's an awful lot of resources on the internet, on social media, that are promising that help. Do they deliver that help? Sometimes, right? Sometimes they do. Yeah, I've done some pretty good help with people through some of my work. Sometimes they're just scamming, though. And sometimes they're scamming at a professional level. Like, that's all they're doing. It's just a fake help. So, experiences, what do they say? Results may vary. But I believe that you're absolutely onto something with the accessibility of healthcare and mental health care, and why social media would be what people might think of as an alternative. And I gotta say, it's barely. I mean, you've got to be so careful about it that it's. And yet I have to say that, and yet at the same time I'm offering a channel that is trying to help people with mental health issues. So what do, right? Man, complicated environment. Now, sad fishing, yeah. Now this is where I'm going to definitely draw a line in the sand as to when content creators go too far. Sciento Cult Tender. That's an interesting name. Getting emotional on streams is becoming the norm because they know donations will follow. Sad fishing is a real thing. Yes, it is. And this is actually detrimental to the creator, I'd say, almost as much or maybe even more than it is to the viewers. Right? The viewers get all sad and they feel so, oh my goodness, and they might really get emotionally involved. And again, this is all parasocial. It's not good. Don't do this. But the creator who is doing this is having to reproduce their trauma or the effects of their trauma on cue, right? On command. We are not actors, and we are not being paid by you to act. But some YouTubers act. They cry, they moan, they wring their hands, right? There is much rending of garments. And it's an act. And it's not always an obvious act. Sometimes it takes a little while to catch on to the crying and to the nonsense and to the false claims. Excuse me. In an effort to continue to get your attention, to get your money and your sympathy, there are content creators who will exaggerate, and repeatedly perform for you. They are sometimes doing this because they're just maliciously aware of the fact that they can con you, and they do so. Or worse, they are they are in such need of validation and acknowledgement that they turn themselves into this other version of themselves for your sympathy and your support, because they don't know or feel they don't have any other way of making their way through life or navigating their problems, right? And I'm not going to sit here and name names. I'm just going to say that that happens. And I think there's a point where it becomes clear to people that it's happening. I wish it was easier to spot for some people, and I wish it was, you know, maybe like more obvious, right, to some. But we're all different, and we all connect, right? And when you have, the reason that it becomes harder to spot is when you're too invested in that person, right? It's a goofy thing. I am saying these things as though we should be suspicious of YouTubers or something. And man, this is just a rough line to walk, because I don't want to create that impression, right? I don't. There are very, very sincere people out there who are really trying to do the work. And then there are people who are pretending. And sometimes it's not obvious until enough time has passed and you start seeing the longer term results or consequences of these people's behavior on and off camera. And then it becomes obvious. But people are funny in what they will put up with and what they will tolerate from others. And their judgments of that. You know, it's very individual. It's really, really interesting. It's really across the boards. As far as that. In other words, sometimes I can, or other people can look at a creator or look at somebody and just go, oh my God, what are they doing? Like, that's just so ridiculous. And then you look and see thousands of people absolutely sucking it up. And you're like, wow, you know, you can see it, but they can't. And, you know, I will just say that you learn to just kind of shut up and let them learn their lesson, because you try to warn them and you become the target. And that ain't fun. Okay, let's carry on here. I'm just going to go through some more of your comments and see if you have some things here to comment on. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody mentions Bjork. Yes, Japan of Green Gables brings up a great point. Have you heard about the allegations of Jared Leto leading an actual cult centered around his musical group? That would seem to me a great example of this overlap. It is. That is exactly a real life example of somebody taking this way too far. My talk and my examples were mainly focused around content creation online and YouTube and social media, but make no mistake that this is exactly how you can start something and then bring it over into real life and start making things a real cult, like a physical world cult, not just a digital online experience. And there is a difference. The difference has to do with emotional investment at the end of the day, because no matter how close you feel to somebody on video, it will never, ever, ever be the same degree of connection and closeness that you will feel with somebody when you meet them in real life. It's just the way our bodies work. It's not a matter of because there's some glass barrier between you. It's because when you can touch and look and feel and be in the presence of somebody, it changes your biology. Let's put it that way. There's things that happen in your body that don't happen when you're watching people on screen. So as much of a parasocial relationship as you can have when you connect with somebody online, and it can go really bad and really extreme, it's always so much worse in real life, that extreme relationship thing. I hope I'm being clear about that. Okay. I am... Red Pill asks, so are cult members in parasympathetic relationships at all? I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to clarify your question for me, Red Pill, because I'm not sure. I've been talking about parasocial relationships. You said parasympathetic here, and I'm not sure what you mean by that. So if you could please clarify that, I will be happy to address it. Yeah, exactly. As Fran Cat says, some people are lonely and want a community and don't recognize that they're in an unhealthy situation. Exactly. It's unhealthy to be alone. Right? It sucks. It does. I mean, I get it, right? And we've all had a recent experience with COVID. I really should have mentioned this as well, right? I mean, the COVID experience sort of forced a lot of us into these like kind of digital relationships for an extended period of time. And I'm telling you, it really messed with our heads all over the world, just across the boards. And there was trauma induced by that, or certainly triggered by that, earlier physical trauma, right? And I don't want to get all Dianetics on everybody here, right? Because that's just ridiculous. But I will say that, when you force people into a kind of enforced solo existence, right? What is that? Enforced isolation, right? Isolated containment. Solitary confinement. That's what I was struggling to get. When you force people into that, their lives blow up. And we make jokes about it, husbands and wives, divorces blew up, all that. A lot of pressure, a lot. And not something really to be laughed off. But a lot of people are really not noticing that we had a World War level event in terms of trauma induction and enforced change of lifestyle and supply chain issues and stress and freak out and people dying. And we just moved on from it like it was an inconvenience or something, and nobody talks about it. It really bothers me that part of our recent in living memory existence is just a big blank in a lot of people's heads. It's like it didn't happen or something, and it has everything to do with why we are the way we are right now with the divisiveness and stuff. Okay. Oh, nice. Bunch of folks watching here. Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to throw that on the screen. I'm sure Bork is a wonderful person, but I really can't stand her music. Okay. Yeah, exactly. People feel like they have a friend talking to them. That's exactly right. Yeah, Stuart, you got it, right? Where was that? Okay, where do parasocial relationships fit on the influence continuum? That's a good question. Let me just pull up the graphic real fast here. All right. Well, it's in a video, so let's see here. Let's see if I can get a graphic of this. There it is. All right, let me throw this up on the screen for a second. Influence, continuum, groovy. This is what I love about live, is sometimes I get to do this. Let's take that. Oh, you had that learning accelerator on there from the Q&A the other day. Let me throw this up here. And let's see here. Influence. All right. Thank you for your patience while I do this. All right. There we go. Okay. So we have a continuum here from constructive and healthy influence on the left to destructive and unhealthy influence on the right. I pulled this from Steve Hassan's site, by the way. For individuals, Unhealthy and destructive influence is cult identity, hate, doctrine, dependency, obedience for leaders, and then for, there we go, relationships. Let me move my little guy. There we go. I think I need to look at this on a, there it is. I can see it a little better when I look at the live stream. Here's what I'm thinking about this right now, is I'm thinking that parasocial relationships push a person down this scale from healthy to unhealthy influence. I'm thinking that it's a destructive force, if you will, or an energy pushing people toward the right, where their behavior will become more and more extreme in defense of or support of or however they're thinking about this creator, right? This is from the fan perspective. They have to defend them. They have to support them. They have to go online and write comments about them. They have to go to their page and be updated on them. And they have to write them emails and write them and follow them on every channel and this kind of thing. And then that builds and builds and builds and builds and builds. And this is where we get that cult of personality kind of thing building up around celebrities and entertainers and stuff, right? I'm pretty sure, you know, people don't go 0 to 100 in one day. It's a gradual thing down this continuum, down this influence continuum, right? So I think it's I think that in answering or addressing the question of where does it fit on the influence continuum, I would say it doesn't fit on there. I would say that it is an influencer of pushing a person to the right on the spectrum. If that, I don't know if that makes sense, but that's how I'm thinking about it right now. So that's what I'm going to say. Let me get my comments back here. Okay, let's carry on. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Gather58 says, the group I have seen most vulnerable to this is the elderly. The lack of tech and media literacy, coupled with the rampant loneliness of many, is a potent soup that I see exploited too much. You know, I'm not going to disagree with you at all on that, but I'm going to say, I'm going to add to that, that I feel that in the digital age over the last 20, 30 years, we have become less and less connected as almost as a species. I don't want to overgeneralize this. There's still plenty of human connection going on in the world. But less, right? And young people, I feel, are suffering from this to a really, really great degree because in a way they never know they don't know what they're missing in a way, right? With that. But I agree with you that the elderly's tech illiteracy and loneliness absolutely are key elements of why, as a population, they would definitely be more vulnerable to parasocial relationships and connecting with people online. Definitely. Okay. I answered that one, I believe. Because I think I said here on Red Pill, he asks here, how prone are cult members to forming parasocial relationships? I think I said, you know, pretty damn vulnerable to it. Pretty prone to doing so because it's their habit. You know, it's literally what they're habituated to. Oh, good. That's interesting. All right, good. Yeah. Yeah, let's address this real fast. SP Spanglish, because I mentioned this briefly earlier, but this is a good point. A therapist told me that it's actually really bad for your mental health to sit in your trauma on YouTube. All it does is re-traumatize. I really have to kind of exclamation point that one. That's a good comment. There's a difference between sharing your trauma and then re-traumatizing yourself. And there's a difference between watching and listening and understanding and being triggered. And it's absolutely the case that sometimes people who watch us talk about our trauma or talk about these very, very extreme, horrible things that happen to people or that people do to each other, this can trigger people. And when we see, you know, when I see audience members talking about how they are crying and crying over, you know, somebody's story or something, I actually worry a little bit for you guys, because I am, you know, not necessarily trying to elicit that kind of response out of people. I want people to get kicked into action, is what I want from people when watching the content I put out. Is I'm hoping you'll watch this and go, this something needs to change. This is wrong. Our society is not structured properly, and we need to do something about this so that these cults stop getting away with what they're getting away with. I want to impel people to action more so than getting them triggered or crying. But make no mistake, there are tons and tons of YouTubers out there who milk those tears and want them, and want to re-traumatize their audience. Now, they might not think about it that way, but in effect, that's what they're doing, because they don't really think much about the mental health consequences of what they're doing. And that's unfortunate, but it doesn't make it any less damaging to the people that they're triggering or traumatizing. So ignorance is not an excuse when it comes to this particular thing. We're talking about people's mental health. And on the part of the viewers, it's also very, very important for every one of you out there to own your own mental health and take actions for yourself that you know you need to take. And that includes taking breaks from social media. And, you know, here I am, really want and need your followership and your support to have a job and keep a roof over my head. And I'm telling you, take a break from this stuff, because this is not good for you in excess, right? In too much quantity. So, yeah, so very good point. And content creators' moral foundations can really go by the boards, right? Their ethical and moral ideas of this can just go right over a cliff because they need the money. And I've watched many content creators over the years in and out of the cult space fall prey to this, right? They clickbaity, salacious nonsense that they are just generating because they know it will get clicks and likes. And they say straight up off mic, well, I got to feed my kids. That ain't an excuse either. That is never an excuse to hurt somebody or damage them. Ever. But people use it all the time. Blows me away. Because I try really hard not to live my life that way, at least, you know. But man, some people just really get into this, and it hurts them. I can think is the reason I got onto this comment, is it's hurting the content creator as much as it's hurting the audience. Right? Because to put yourself in a place where you have to act out your trauma or act out, you know, the bad things that have happened to you for sympathy and support, it keeps it all in place. It doesn't let you let it go. You're setting up a condition in your life where you can't let go of your trauma. You have to milk it. And yes, that very much applies to SPTV. Very much. Okay. All right. Yeah, it does. So gonna be good comments today. You guys are dropping some good truth bombs in here. Let's see. All right. Jim Beam is not one of the best mental health out there. Red pill. Jeez. Okay. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. That's right. Yeah, Jody Hildebrandt is a great example of a destructive influence. Very good, Lulu Barbaroo. Lulu Barbaroo. Lulu Baru. There we go. Thank you. Sorry thank you for your patience in me getting that name right. All right. Yeah, not everybody has to share my views on Bjork. Okay, good. Yes, every time you like the video, Benson gets a cookie. That's right. All right. I think I've gotten down to the end of the comments here that we've done today. If you have any last bits, now's the time to get them in because I think I'm going to start wrapping up the show. I hope that today's episode was informative. I really, really do. Again, this was done by request, and I am more than happy to entertain more requests from you guys as far as talking about stuff. Did I do a decent job today with this? Are there other aspects of this that I totally missed? Do we need to do a part 2? Is there more about this topic you wanted to hear about? Are there particular other activity behaviors or things that people do parasocially that you want to know more about? Let me know. Drop them in the comments on the replay if you're watching this later, for that audience. But I hope that that this information was useful and helpful in some fashion. Yes. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, AGT Mom. You always cover things that are difficult to find on other channels. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to do. So keep coming around because you'll keep getting that. All right, folks. So let me know like I said, what else you want to know about this, because this is, I think I've covered it pretty well, but again, you guys let me know. Thank you very much for coming around and watching this live podcast. This will go up in audio form on my podcast probably tomorrow. I'm going to be delayed in getting it up because of the way YouTube and the 24-hour rule with downloading the complete YouTube show and all that. So anyway, I'll figure all those technical things out. But the audio version of this will go up tomorrow on Podbean. And I will see you guys tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel, 1 o'clock Sunday live for Critical Q&A. All right, I look forward to that. And there we go. Bye-bye. Always so awkward at goodbyes.